There is something happening inside you right now that you have never been given a name for. Not a feeling exactly, not quite a thought. Something older than both, a kind of hum at the edge of your awareness, like a frequency just below the threshold of what you normally hear, pressing upward through the layers of everything you've been taught to call real. You've felt it before. In the moment before sleep, when the boundary between your body and the room around you becomes uncertain. In the stillness after something overwhelming, when the world goes quiet and something vast seems to be looking back at you through the silence. In those moments when you've stood in ordinary light and felt, without being able to explain it, that you were on the edge of something enormous. That the surface of things was about to give way. You've been told that feeling is nothing. Imagination. The brain doing what brains do when they're tired or overwhelmed or seeking meaning in the noise. You've been handed explanations that stop at the surface and told to be satisfied with them. But there's a layer beneath that, and what's beneath it is not imagination. What's beneath it is what quantum mechanics found when it looked beneath the surface of matter itself. What's beneath it is what every major wisdom tradition on Earth has been pointing toward for thousands of years, in languages that had no word for quantum field but mapped the territory precisely anyway. What's beneath it is a process that is happening inside your biology right now, in this moment, whether or not you have a name for it. A process that the surface version of your life has never given you permission to see. Today, we lift that veil. What you're about to encounter in the next hour is not a theory. It is not a belief system you'll be asked to adopt. It is a series of layers, each one peeled back to reveal what was hidden beneath it. Each one showing you something that was always there, waiting for your awareness to look in that direction. By the time we reach the deepest layer, you will not be the same person who pressed play on this transmission. Not because something will have been added to you, because something will have been revealed that was already there, beneath the surface you've been living on. Let's begin with what you think you know. You know that you have a body. You've lived in it your whole life. You know it gets sick and heals. You know it ages. You know that at some point it will stop working. This is the surface understanding. The one handed to you by a culture that learned about the body through dissection, through the study of what happens when life has already left it. The body as a machine, elegant, complex, but ultimately mechanical. Parts that wear out, systems that fail, a clock running down. This is the surface, and it feels solid because everyone around you agrees on it, because the institutions built on it are large and powerful and have been running for centuries, because when you go to a doctor, this is the map they use. The body as mechanism, the body as matter. But peel back that surface and look at what's underneath. Beneath the body as mechanism is the body as field, not a metaphor, not a spiritual concept, a measurable, documentable, scientifically verifiable field of electromagnetic and biophotonic energy that surrounds and interpenetrates every cell of what you call your physical form. This is not fringe science. This is what happens when physicists and biologists stop studying the body the way a mechanic studies a car and start studying it the way a quantum physicist studies matter, which is to say, by looking beneath the surface of what appears solid to discover what's actually there. And what's actually there changes everything about what you think your body is. Your body is not primarily a collection of solid parts. At the quantum level, the level beneath the molecular level, beneath the atomic level, the level where the actual fabric of what you call physical reality is woven, your body is more empty space than matter. The atoms that compose your cells are themselves almost entirely empty. The nucleus of an atom, the densest part, is so small relative to the electron cloud surrounding it that if you expanded an atom to the size of a football stadium, the nucleus would be the size of a marble at the center. Everything else is space, vibrating, patterned, energetically active space. What you call your solid body is, at its foundation, a pattern of energy in a field, but there's a layer beneath that. Because if your body is a pattern of energy in a field, then the question that changes everything is not what is the body made of, but what is generating the pattern, what is holding the form, what is the intelligence behind the organization. Because the organization is extraordinary. Trillions of cells, each one a universe of biochemical complexity, each one communicating with the others at speeds and through channels that conventional biology is only beginning to map. An immune system that can distinguish self from not self at a molecular level. A nervous system that processes more information per second than any computer ever built. A regenerative capacity that, under the right conditions, can rebuild tissue, regrow nerve connections, reverse what was thought to be permanent damage. What is organizing all of that? What is the intelligence behind the pattern? This is where quantum mechanics stops being abstract and starts being the most important science you've never been taught to apply to yourself. In 1944, Erwin Schrödinger, one of the founding architects of quantum mechanics, the man whose thought experiment you've probably heard of even if you've never studied physics, gave a series of lectures that were later published under a title that should have changed everything. What is life? In those lectures, Schrödinger proposed something that was radical at the time and remains underappreciated now. He proposed that life, biological life, operates according to quantum principles. That the organizing intelligence behind living systems is not mechanical, not chemical in the ordinary sense, but quantum coherent. That life is, in some fundamental way, a quantum phenomenon. Decades later, the field of quantum biology began to prove him right. Quantum coherence, the ability of quantum systems to maintain superposition and entanglement across multiple states simultaneously, something physicists long assumed was too fragile to survive in the warm, wet, chaotic environment of a living cell, has now been documented in photosynthesis, in bird navigation, in enzyme function, and in the process by which DNA is read and transcribed. Life, it turns out, is not just using chemistry. life is using quantum mechanics. The deepest processes of your biology are quantum processes. And this is where the veil begins to lift. Because if your body is operating at the quantum level, then it is not subject only to the rules of classical mechanics. It is subject to the rules of quantum mechanics. And the rules of quantum mechanics are not the rules of a machine running down. They are the rules of a system that exists in relationship with information, with observation, with the field around it, in ways that have no equivalent in classical physics. The surface tells you your body is a machine aging toward entropy. The depth tells you your body is a quantum field in constant communication with the information environment around it. Those are not the same thing. They are not even close to the same thing. If what you're encountering in these layers is resonating with something you already sensed was there, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel so we can keep going deeper together. Now let's go deeper. Because what quantum biology reveals about the body is only the first hidden layer. Beneath the body as quantum field, there is something that researchers in biophysics have been studying for decades with increasing precision and decreasing mainstream coverage. The biophotonic field. In the 1970s, a German biophysicist named Fritz Albert Popp made a discovery that should have rewritten the textbook on human biology. He discovered that living cells emit light, not metaphorically, not as a spiritual concept, measurably, verifiably, quantifiably. Living cells emit coherent photons, particles of light, in patterns that are not random but organized, structured, communicative. Popp called this emission biophotons, and he spent decades documenting what they do. They appear to function as a communication system, a field of light generated by and surrounding every living organism that carries biological information at speeds and across distances that conventional biochemistry cannot account for. The biophotonic field is, in Popp's model, a kind of coherent light field that the body uses to coordinate its own processes, to maintain the organization of its trillion-cell community, to communicate information that cannot travel fast enough through chemical pathways alone. Your body is generating light, right now, in this moment, a field of coherent photons surrounding you, communicating between your cells, organizing the pattern that you call your physical form, hidden in plain sight. And here is where the ancient wisdom traditions step forward, because they have been describing this for thousands of years. The Sanskrit texts of ancient India, some of the oldest written documents on earth, describe what they call the pranamaya kosha, the body made of prana, the life force that surrounds and interpenetrates the physical form. Not the physical body, a body of energy that contains and generates the physical. The Taoist tradition of ancient China describes the same field as qi, the animating intelligence that flows through the body in channels called meridians, and whose balance or disruption determines health and disease. The ancient Egyptians wrote about the ka, the energetic double of the physical body, the field form that the material body was understood to be a projection of. The Kabbalistic tradition describes the aura as multiple interpenetrating fields of light surrounding the human form, each one corresponding to a different level of consciousness and vitality. across every major ancient civilization, in traditions that had no contact with each other, speaking languages with no common root. The same hidden layer was mapped. The body of light, the energetic field, the quantum field, described in the language available before quantum mechanics existed. The mystics mapped this hidden layer long before instruments existed to measure it. And now the instruments exist, and they are finding what the mystics described. But there's a layer beneath that, because the biophotonic field is not just a communication system. It is not just the body talking to itself. What the deepest research into this field suggests is something more extraordinary. Something that connects the body's light field to what quantum physics calls the zero-point field, the quantum vacuum, the sea of energy that underlies all of physical reality. The zero-point field is not empty space. This is perhaps the most important thing that quantum mechanics discovered, and that almost no one outside of physics departments fully understands. What we call empty space, the vacuum, the nothing between things, is not nothing. It is a field of quantum energy fluctuations, a sea of virtual particles constantly coming into and going out of existence. A ground state of energy that permeates all of space, and that contains, according to calculations that physicists agree on, even when they disagree about the implications, more energy per cubic centimeter than all the matter in the observable universe combined. The vacuum is not empty. It is full. It is the most energy-dense thing in existence. And it is everywhere, including inside you, including in the space between the atoms of your cells, including in the space between your cells themselves. Your body does not exist against a background of empty space. Your body exists within and as a pattern in the zero-point field. And here is where the concept of healing, of regeneration, of what the title of this transmission calls immortality, stops being a hope and starts being a question about physics. If your body is a pattern in a field, and if that field is connected to an infinite reservoir of energy and information, then the question of what limits your body's capacity to heal and regenerate is not primarily a question about chemistry. It is a question about coherence, about the quality of the relationship between your body's field and the field it exists within, about whether the pattern is clear or distorted, coherent or fragmented, in resonance with the organizing intelligence of the field, or cut off from it. This is where the veil lifts in a way that changes everything. The surface understanding of healing is that the body heals when the right chemicals are applied, when the right interventions are made, when the right conditions are created from the outside. The depth understanding of healing is that the body heals when its own quantum coherence is restored, when the biophotonic field returns to its natural organization, when the communication between cells is clear and unobstructed, when the pattern that the body is becomes aligned with the information in the field that the body exists within. Healing at the quantum level is not repair, it is resonance. And now let's go to the layer that most people never reach. The layer that connects quantum mechanics to the question of mortality itself. You have been told that aging is inevitable, that the body wears out, that entropy wins. This is the surface understanding. It is based on a classical mechanical model of the body as a machine made of parts that degrade over time. And at the surface level, it appears to be true. You can see it, you can measure it. The telomeres shorten, the cells divide fewer times, the repair mechanisms slow down. The surface says, this is what aging is, and it ends in one direction. But peel back that surface and look at what's underneath. Beneath the surface understanding of aging is a discovery that is still being absorbed by mainstream biology. A discovery so disruptive to the classical model that it has been simultaneously celebrated and minimized, studied and sidelined, because its full implications are too large for the existing framework to contain. The discovery is this: aging is not a fixed program. It is an epigenetic process, and epigenetic processes can be reversed. The word epigenetics refers to changes in gene expression, changes in which genes are turned on or off, that occur without changes to the underlying DNA sequence itself. The DNA is the hardware, the epigenome is the software, and the software can be rewritten. In 2006, Japanese researcher Shinya Yamanaka won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for demonstrating that mature, specialized, adult cells that had fully differentiated into specific types, could be reprogrammed back to a pluripotent state, a state of potential, a state of youth, by introducing just 4 specific transcription factors. He took old, specialized cells and returned them to a state of biological openness, of possibility, of what could only be called, in the language of quantum mechanics, superposition. This was not a minor discovery. This was a demonstration that the biological clock is not a one-way mechanism. It is a two-way information system. And information systems can be given new information. But there's a layer beneath that. Because Yamanaka's discovery, as revolutionary as it was, still operated within the classical framework. It used external chemical factors to reprogram the cells. It was still intervention from outside. What the emerging science of quantum biology and what the ancient wisdom traditions both point toward is something more radical. The possibility that the reprogramming signal is not external, that it comes from within the field, that the information that determines how your cells express their genes, how old or young, how vital or depleted, how coherent or fragmented your biological pattern is information that is generated by and responsive to your own consciousness. This is where the ancient knowing and the quantum science converge on the same hidden layer. The Vedantic tradition of ancient India described what they called the causal body, the Karana Sharira, the deepest layer of the human energy system, the body of pure consciousness that underlies and generates the subtler energy bodies, which in turn generate the physical body. In this model, the physical body is not the primary reality. It is the outermost expression of a layered system whose deepest layer is pure awareness itself. And the health, the vitality, the coherence of the physical body is a downstream expression of the quality of awareness at the causal level. The Hermetic tradition, which synthesized Egyptian, Greek, and early Gnostic wisdom, express the same understanding in different language. As above, so below. As within, so without. The outer world, including the body, is a reflection of the inner reality. Change the inner reality and the outer reality must change. Not as metaphor, as mechanism. The Taoist tradition described the same principle through the concept of Wu Wei, effortless action, the alignment of the individual with the Tao, the underlying intelligence of the universe, through which the body's natural vitality is not generated but allowed, not created but restored, not forced but invited. Every tradition, the same hidden layer. Consciousness as the deepest organizing principle of the body. Awareness as the field that the physical pattern is a projection of. And now quantum mechanics is finding the same layer. The observer effect in quantum mechanics, the documented, reproducible, mathematically precise phenomenon by which the act of observation affects the behavior of quantum systems, is not a quirk of measurement. It is not an artifact of the instruments used. It is a fundamental feature of how quantum reality works. The quantum field does not have a fixed state until it is observed, until a measurement is made, until consciousness interacts with it. Before observation, the system exists in superposition, in a state of pure potential, containing all possible states simultaneously. After observation, the wave function collapses to a specific state. This is not philosophy. This is the most precisely tested and consistently confirmed finding in the history of experimental science. The quantum field responds to consciousness. Observation changes outcomes. Awareness is not a passive receiver of reality. It is a participant in the generation of reality. And your body is a quantum system, which means your awareness, the quality of your attention, the information carried in your consciousness, is not separate from your biology. It is in communication with your biology. At the quantum level, right now. This is where the concept of the quantum healing field stops being a metaphor and starts being a description of something real. I want to pause here and ask you something before we go further. Has there been a moment in your own life where you sensed something beneath the surface of what you were being told was real about your body, your health, your capacity to heal? A truth you couldn't quite name but couldn't stop sensing? Drop it in the comments. What you felt before you had the language for it matters more than you know. Let me show you something. Let me tell you about a man named Elias. Elias was a cartographer, not the modern kind who works with satellites and algorithms, an old kind, the kind who made maps by walking. He lived in a city built in layers, the way very old cities are, each century of habitation built on the ruins of the one before it, so that if you dug down through the streets, you would find the foundations of a medieval city beneath the Baroque one, and beneath that the stones of a Roman settlement, and beneath that the earthworks of something older still, something that had no written history, only the memory of the soil. Elias had spent his life mapping the surface, the streets as they were, the buildings as they stood. He was precise, thorough, meticulous. He knew the city better than anyone. He could tell you the name of every street, the height of every building, the distance between any 2 points. He had mapped it completely, or so he believed. One evening, a woman came to his workshop. She was old, older than anyone he could account for, and she carried a rolled document that she placed on his table without asking permission. When she unrolled it, Elias saw a map of his city, but not the city he knew, a city beneath his city. The streets were different, the geometry was different, the proportions were different, and at the center, where his map showed the main square, with its fountain and its market stalls, this older map showed something else entirely, a structure, ancient, vast, extending downward rather than upward, like an inverted tower, like the roots of the city itself going down into something he had no name for. He told her she was wrong. He had mapped everything. He had walked every street. He knew the surface completely. She looked at him with something that was not quite pity and not quite amusement. She said, "You have mapped the top layer of a thing with infinite depth. You know the surface as well as anyone has ever known it, but the surface is the thinnest part. And what you're calling the city is only the most recent expression of something that has been here far longer than any of the layers you can see." He didn't believe her, but he went to the center of his map, to the main square, and he looked, not at the surface. For the first time in his life, he looked beneath the surface. He looked at what the stones were resting on, and he found a seam, a crack between the surface world and the layer below it. And through that crack, light was coming up. Not sunlight. Something else. Something that had been there the whole time, pressing upward through the layers, waiting for someone to look down instead of across. He spent the rest of his life mapping what was beneath. He never finished. There was always another layer, each one older, each one more luminous, each one more real than the one above it. And he understood finally that the map he had spent his life making was not wrong. It was just the beginning. The surface was real, but the surface was the least of what was there. You have been mapping the surface of your own body, of your own life, of your own consciousness, and you have been thorough. You have been precise. You know the surface well, but the surface is the thinnest part. What Elias discovered is what this transmission has been building toward. And if the layers we've uncovered here are calling you to go further than we can reach in a single sitting, there is a complete map of the descent. Beneath the veil, a quantum map of reality's hidden layers takes you through all 5 layers of this excavation, from the consensus surface down to the original frequency, with practices at every depth designed to shift your awareness permanently. You'll find it in the description below. Now let's talk about what the quantum healing field actually is, because this is the layer most people never reach, and it is the one that changes everything. The quantum healing field is not a product, it is not a technique, it is not something that exists outside you and must be applied to you. It is the coherent quantum field that your body both generates and exists within, the biophotonic emission field, the zero-point field interaction, the epigenetic information environment that your cells are swimming in and reading and responding to at every moment. It is the field of your own biology at its deepest level, and it is not fixed. It is not static. It is not running a program you cannot change. It is responsive. It is dynamic. It is, in the most precise quantum mechanical sense, observational. It responds to what is observing it, which means it responds to you. This is the layer that the ancient healing traditions were pointing at when they described practices that modern medicine has consistently underestimated and consistently failed to explain using its own framework. Meditation, breathwork, visualization, prayer, sound healing, movement practices like yoga and qigong and tai chi. These are not primitive attempts to do what modern medicine does better. They are technologies for interacting with the quantum healing field. Technologies developed over thousands of years of empirical observation of what happens when human consciousness engages with the body at a level deeper than chemistry. And the evidence that they work is not anecdotal. It is accumulating in peer-reviewed research at a rate that the mainstream framework struggles to absorb. Studies on meditation and telomere length, the biological marker of cellular aging, show that long-term meditators have significantly longer telomeres than non-meditators of the same chronological age. Not slightly longer, significantly longer. The cells of experienced meditators are biologically younger than the cells of people who have lived the same number of years but have not engaged in this practice of directed awareness. Studies on the relaxation response, documented by Harvard cardiologist Herbert Benson, show that specific contemplative practices produce measurable changes in gene expression, turning on genes associated with cellular repair, immune function, and energy metabolism, and turning off genes associated with inflammation and cellular stress. Not through chemistry, through awareness, through the quality of attention brought to the body. Studies on visualization and immune function show that guided imagery, the deliberate use of mental images to communicate with the body's biological systems, produces measurable changes in immune cell activity, in natural killer cell counts, in the body's ability to identify and destroy abnormal cells. The body is listening to consciousness. The quantum healing field is responsive to the quality of awareness that is directed into it. But there's a layer beneath that. Because the quantum healing field is not just responsive to individual consciousness. It exists within and is connected to a larger field. And this is where the concept that the thumbnail of this transmission names, the concept of immortality, stops being a fantasy and starts being a question about the nature of what you actually are. Quantum field theory, the most successful and precisely verified theory in the history of physics, describes reality as fundamentally field-based. Particles, the things we think of as the building blocks of matter, are not primary. They are excitations of fields. The electron is not a thing. It is a ripple in the electron field that permeates all of space. The photon is not a thing. It is a ripple in the electromagnetic field. Every particle of matter in the universe is an excitation of an underlying quantum field, including you. At the deepest level of what quantum field theory describes, You are not a collection of particles moving through space. You are a pattern of excitations in a quantum field, a coherent, organized, self-referential pattern of excitations in a field that extends throughout the universe. Your body is where the field is most densely organized in the pattern called you. But the field itself does not have edges. The field itself does not have a boundary. The field itself is, in the language of physics, non-local. It is everywhere simultaneously. The surface version of you has a body with edges, has a lifespan with a beginning and an end, has a location in space and a position in time. The depth version of you is a pattern in a field that has no edges, no fixed location, and no inherent temporal limit. This is not mysticism. This is what quantum field theory describes. The question of whether the pattern persists beyond the dissolution of its densest physical expression is a question that physics does not yet have the framework to fully answer. But it is a question that physics is no longer able to dismiss. And it is a question that the ancient wisdom traditions answered thousands of years ago. The concept of immortality in the ancient traditions is not the naive fantasy of the physical body living forever that the surface dismissal of these traditions assumes it to be. The ancient concept of immortality is more precise than that. It is the recognition that what you are at the deepest level, the pattern of consciousness, the organizing intelligence, the awareness that is reading these words right now, is not a product of the physical body. It is the field that the physical body is a temporary, local, dense expression of. The Hindu tradition describes the Atman, the individual self, as identical in its deepest nature with Brahman, the universal consciousness, the field of pure awareness that underlies all of existence. The individual is not separate from the universal. The wave is not separate from the ocean. The pattern is not separate from the field. And the field does not die when a particular wave subsides. The Buddhist tradition, approaching the same hidden layer from a different direction, describes the nature of mind as luminous and unborn, not created, not destroyed. The appearances arise and dissolve. The awareness in which they arise is not subject to arising and dissolution. The Hermetic tradition describes the soul as a spark of the divine fire, a localized expression of the universal intelligence that animates all things. The spark returns to the fire. The individual pattern returns to the universal field. Nothing is lost. The information is conserved. Conservation of information. This is a principle that physics takes very seriously. In quantum mechanics, information cannot be destroyed. It can be transformed, encoded differently, distributed across the field, but the total information content of a closed system is conserved. This is not a minor technical detail. It is a fundamental principle of quantum reality, and its implications for what happens to the information pattern called you when the physical body dissolves are implications that physicists like Stephen Hawking spent decades wrestling with, because the mathematics of quantum mechanics says the information cannot simply disappear. Where does it go? the ancient traditions have answers. Quantum mechanics has not yet caught up with its own implications, but the direction of both is the same, toward the recognition that what you are is more than the surface, more than the body, more than the local, temporary, physical pattern. What you are at the deepest level is a pattern in a field that is infinite, that is non-local, that is not subject to the ordinary rules of entropy and dissolution that govern the surface world. Now let's go to the layer that this transmission is really about, because everything we've uncovered so far, the body as quantum field, the biophotonic light body, the zero-point field connection, the epigenetic responsiveness to consciousness, the non-local nature of the quantum field pattern you are, all of it has been pointing toward a single practical question. A question that the title of this transmission encodes in language that is simultaneously more literal and more precise than it first appears. If you are seeing this, your quantum healing field is activating. What does that mean? It means this: the fact that you are here, that you pressed play on this transmission, that you have followed the layers this far, is not random. It is not coincidence. In the framework of quantum mechanics, observation is not passive. The act of directing your awareness towards something, the act of choosing to look at a particular layer of reality, is itself a quantum event. It is a collapse of the wave function in a particular direction. It is a choice made not just by the surface level of your mind, but by the deeper organizational intelligence of your quantum field. You are here because something in the field of what you are is ready to see this layer, ready to recognize it, ready to resonate with it. Not as new information being added from outside, as a recognition of what was already there, beneath the surface of what you thought you knew about yourself. This is what activation means in the language of quantum biology. Not an external event, a resonance, a coherence. The quantum healing field of your body coming into alignment with information it was already structured to receive. Like a radio receiver tuning to a frequency that was always being broadcast, but that required a specific configuration of the receiver to hear. Your body has been broadcasting and receiving in this field your entire life. The question has never been whether the field is there. The question has always been whether your awareness was tuned to the frequency where the field's communication becomes audible. And something brought you here. Something in the deeper layers of what you are made the choice to look in this direction. That choice is the activation. But there's a layer beneath that, because activation is not a moment, it is a process. And the process has specific mechanics that the quantum biology research is beginning to map with increasing precision. Here is what we know about how the quantum healing field activates and what happens when it does. The first layer of activation is coherence. The biophotonic field, the light body that Pop and his colleagues documented, has two states: coherent and incoherent. In coherent biophotonic emission, the light produced by the cells is organized, structured, phase correlated, like laser light compared to the diffuse light of a light bulb. In incoherent emission, the light is random, scattered, disorganized. What the research shows is that healthy, vital, young cells emit highly coherent biophotons, and that as cells age or become diseased or are subjected to chronic stress, the coherence of their biophotonic emission decreases. The light becomes scattered. Healing at the quantum level is a return to coherence, a reorganization of the light field, and the mechanisms that restore coherence include precisely the practices that every ancient wisdom tradition prescribed for exactly this purpose. Meditation, which reduces the cortisol and inflammatory signals that disrupt cellular coherence. Breath work, which changes the electromagnetic environment of the cells through shifts in oxygen and carbon dioxide that affect quantum processes at the molecular level. Sound, which introduces coherent vibrational patterns that entrain the body's own oscillations. Movement practices like yoga and qigong, which have been shown to affect biophotonic emission directly, increasing coherence and intensity. These are not metaphors. These are quantum mechanics. These are the technologies for restoring the coherence of the light body that the ancient traditions developed over thousands of years of empirical observation, and that quantum biology is now beginning to document with instruments. The second layer of activation is what researchers call quantum entanglement within biological systems. Entanglement is the quantum phenomenon by which two particles that have interacted become correlated in such a way that the state of one instantly affects the state of the other, regardless of the distance between them. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance and spent years trying to disprove it. The experiments proved it is real. Non-local correlation is a fundamental feature of quantum reality, and it appears to operate within living systems. The research on quantum coherence in photosynthesis, for which the 2023 Nobel Prize in Chemistry was awarded in part, showed that plants achieve near-perfect energy transfer efficiency through quantum coherence and what appears to be quantum entanglement between molecular systems. The energy does not travel the most direct path. It travels all paths simultaneously and finds the most efficient route through quantum superposition. It is, in the most precise sense, a quantum computation happening in living tissue. Your body may be doing the same thing. The coordination between your cells, between your organs, between the systems of your body, may not be fully explicable through classical chemical signaling. There may be quantum coherent processes, quantum entanglement between molecular systems within your cells, that allow for a kind of instantaneous coordination that classical biology cannot account for. And if that is true, then the coherence of your quantum healing field is not just a metaphor for health. It is a description of the actual mechanism by which your body maintains its organization, its vitality, its capacity to repair and regenerate. The third layer of activation is the most extraordinary, and it is the one that connects most directly to the concept of what the ancient traditions called immortality. In 2006, a team of researchers at the Salk Institute published a finding that received relatively little mainstream attention given its implications. They found that certain genes, the same genes that Yamanaka would later use in his reprogramming experiments, are not just developmental switches. They are what the researchers called a fountain of youth program, a set of genetic instructions that, when activated, can reverse cellular aging markers, restore telomere length, improve mitochondrial function, and return cells to a state of biological youth. These genes are not foreign to the body. They are already there, in every cell, in your cells, right now. They are part of the genome that you carry. They are not switched on by default in adult cells, but they can be switched on. They respond to signals, to information, to the epigenetic environment. And the epigenetic environment is responsive to consciousness. This is the chain of connections that the surface understanding never draws, because each link in the chain belongs to a different field: quantum physics, quantum biology, epigenetics, consciousness research, ancient wisdom, and the surface world keeps these fields separate. The depth understanding draws the chain together. Your consciousness affects your epigenetic environment. Your epigenetic environment affects which genes are expressed. The genes available to be expressed include genes that can reverse cellular aging. The reversal of cellular aging is, in biological terms, a restoration of the quantum coherence of the body's field. And the restoration of quantum coherence is what every ancient wisdom tradition called healing, what the deepest traditions called immortality, not the immortality of the surface body living forever unchanged. The immortality of the pattern maintaining its coherence, renewing itself, drawing on the infinite energy of the zero-point field to sustain its organization against entropy, not by defying the laws of physics, but by operating at a level of physics that the surface understanding has not yet reached. This is the layer beneath the layer beneath the layer. This is what's been hidden in plain sight in the structure of your own biology. Now I want to give you something to do with this, not a belief to hold, a practice, a perception shift, a way of engaging with your quantum healing field right now, in this moment, using what quantum biology and ancient wisdom both agree is the most direct access point available to you. Here is what I want you to do. Wherever you are right now, allow your attention to settle, not to go blank, not to stop thinking, just to settle the way a snow globe settles when you stop shaking it. Let the surface activity of your mind continue, but let your attention drop beneath it, like dropping a stone through the surface of water to the still layer below. Now bring your attention to your body, not to the thoughts you have about your body, not to the sensations you're monitoring or the discomforts you're aware of, to the body itself, to the fact of it. Act. The extraordinary, improbable, quantum coherent, biophotonic emitting, zero-point field connected, epigenetically responsive field pattern of it. Now recognize this. The cells of your body are emitting light right now. Coherent photons, a field of organized light surrounding and interpenetrating every cell of what you call your physical form. You cannot see it with your physical eyes, but it is there, measurably, verifiably, documentably there. Let your awareness rest in that recognition, not as a visualization, as a recognition, as the acknowledgement of something that is already happening, that has always been happening, that you are now choosing to be aware of. Now notice what happens in the body when you hold that recognition, not what you think should happen, what actually happens. There may be a warmth, a tingling, a sense of expansion, as if the boundary of what you call your body becomes less sharp. There may be a stillness that is not emptiness, but fullness, a sense of something that was humming beneath the surface, becoming audible. That is the quantum healing field, not activated by the recognition, recognized because it was always active. The recognition is not the cause. It is the tuning, the receiver coming into alignment with the broadcast that was always there. Stay with this for a moment. Let the recognition deepen. Let the awareness of the light field of your body become more present than the awareness of the surface story about your body, more present than the age you've been assigned, more present than the diagnoses you've been given, more present than the limitations you've been told are fixed. The surface tells you one thing, the depth tells you something completely different. Feel what shifts when you see this layer. Now let's go to the deepest layer we're going to reach in this transmission. The layer that everything else has been pointing toward. The layer that the concept of immortality is pointing at when you strip away the surface interpretation and look at what's actually beneath it. You are not your body. This is the oldest statement in the wisdom tradition and the most consistently misunderstood. It is not a statement that dismisses the body. It is a statement about layers. The body is real. The body is extraordinary. The body is a quantum field of breathtaking complexity and coherence. But the body is not the deepest layer of what you are. Beneath the body is the biophotonic field. Beneath the biophotonic field is the quantum field pattern. Beneath the quantum field pattern is the awareness that is generating the pattern. And beneath the awareness that is generating the pattern is something that quantum mechanics approaches from one direction, and every major wisdom tradition approaches from another direction, and both arrive at the same recognition. Pure awareness, consciousness itself, not consciousness as a product of the brain, not awareness as something the body generates. Awareness as the field in which the body, the brain, the biophotonic emission, the quantum field pattern, all of it arises. The Vedantic tradition calls this Brahman. Pure consciousness, the ground of being, the field of awareness that is not generated by anything because it is the ground in which all generation occurs. The Buddhist tradition calls it Buddha nature. Rigpa, the nature of mind, not a thing, not a state, the ground of all states. The awareness that is aware of awareness itself, unborn, undying, not because it lives forever, but because it was never subject to birth and death in the way that the patterns arising within it are. The Hermetic tradition calls it the All, the divine mind, the intelligence that thinks the universe into existence and sustains it through its attention. And quantum mechanics, approaching from the direction of empirical measurement and mathematical formalism, arrives at something that sounds remarkably similar. The quantum field, the zero-point field, the vacuum energy, the ground state of physical reality, is not a passive background. It is an active, information-carrying, coherence-generating field that underlies all of physical reality and from which all particles, all matter, all energy, all structure arises and into which it dissolves. The ground of physical reality is not matter, it is field, it is information. It is something that the language of physics has not yet fully found the words for, but that the language of consciousness studies is beginning to describe as awareness itself. What if consciousness is not a product of the physical universe? What if the physical universe is a pattern arising within consciousness? What if the zero-point field and the field of pure awareness described by every wisdom tradition are not two different things, but two descriptions from two different directions of the same hidden layer? This is not a question physics can currently answer, but it is a question that the direction of physics is moving toward, and it is a question that the ancient traditions answered, each in their own language, with remarkable consistency. If what you are at the deepest level is not a pattern in a field but the field itself, then the question of immortality is not a question about whether the pattern persists. It is a recognition that what you are was never subject to dissolution in the first place. The pattern arises and dissolves. The awareness in which it arises does not. This is the layer beneath the layer beneath the layer beneath the layer. This is the deepest excavation this transmission takes you to. And I want to be precise here, because this is where the language of mysticism and the language of physics both reach their limit and point beyond themselves. This is not a belief being offered to you, it is a direction being pointed in. The question of whether consciousness is fundamental or emergent, whether awareness is the ground of reality or a product of it, is the deepest open question in both physics and philosophy. It is called the hard problem of consciousness, and it has not been solved. What has been established is that the classical assumption that consciousness is simply what brains do, that awareness is a byproduct of neural computation, is not sufficient to explain the data. Not the quantum mechanical data, not the consciousness research data, not the data from studies of near-death experiences and non-local consciousness phenomena that serious researchers like Pim van Lommel and Sam Parnia have been accumulating for decades. The surface assumption is that consciousness is what the brain produces. The depth question is whether the brain is what consciousness produces. And the depth question is the one that the evidence, taken as a whole, is pointing toward. You are not being asked to believe this. You are being shown the direction the layers point in, and invited to look. Because here is what changes when you look in that direction. Here is what shifts when you stop living at the surface of your own consciousness and begin to inhabit the recognition of the depth. The body that you thought was running down becomes the quantum field that is capable of coherence and regeneration. The aging that you thought was inevitable becomes the epigenetic program that is responsive to information. The information that the epigenome is responsive to becomes the quality of awareness that you bring to your own biology. The quality of awareness becomes the degree to which you are living from the surface or from the depth. And the depth is not a place you have to travel to. It is what you already are beneath the layers of conditioning, assumption, and collective agreement about what is real. The quantum healing field is not something you need to acquire. It is what your body already is, at the level beneath the surface understanding of it. Activation is not something that happens to you from outside. It is the recognition of what is already happening, what has always been happening in the quantum substrate of your biology. And that recognition, that shift from surface to depth, from mechanical body to quantum field, from aging machine to coherent pattern in an infinite field, is not just a philosophical shift. It is a biological event. Because the body is listening. The epigenome is reading the information environment. The quantum coherence of the biophotonic field is responsive to the quality of awareness. The pattern is in communication with the field. And when the awareness shifts from surface to depth, the field responds. This is what the ancient traditions called awakening. Not a spiritual metaphor, a literal shift in the information environment of the body, a change in the quality of the signal that the quantum healing field is receiving from the consciousness that it is an expression of, a restoration of coherence, a return to the natural state of the field before the layers of conditioning and surface living accumulated over it like sediment over an archaeological site. Let me tell you about a woman named Mara. Mara had been told, at 43, that her body was failing in ways that could be managed but not reversed. The tests were clear. The markers were moving in one direction. The doctors were kind and precise and certain. They gave her a framework and a timeline and a set of interventions that would slow the progression. They were not wrong within their framework. The surface understanding was accurate. The mechanism was as described. The prognosis was as stated. Mara accepted this, for a time. She accepted it because the authority behind it was large, and the framework was coherent, and she had no other map. But something in her did not accept it. Something beneath the surface of her acceptance. A knowing that was not quite a thought and not quite a feeling. A hum at the edge of her awareness. Like a frequency she couldn't quite hear but couldn't stop sensing. She began, not because she had a plan, but because something in her was compelled to sit in stillness each morning before the day began, not meditating in any formal sense, just sitting, just letting the surface settle, just allowing her awareness to drop beneath the story about her body to the body itself, to the fact of it, to the extraordinary aliveness of it even in its current state, to the light she could not see but somehow knew was there. She began to talk to her cells, not in the language of demand or fear or the desperate bargaining of illness, in the language of recognition, of gratitude, of the acknowledgement that something extraordinary was happening in her biology at every moment, regardless of what the surface markers said. She began to treat her body not as a machine that was breaking down, but as a field that was temporarily out of coherence. And she began to ask, not force, not will, not demand, but ask for the coherence to return. She changed nothing dramatic. She did not stop her medical treatment. She did not reject the framework she'd been given. She simply added a layer beneath it. The layer of quantum recognition, the layer of treating her body as the field it actually was, rather than only the machine it appeared to be. 6 months later, the markers had shifted, not dramatically, not miraculously in the surface sense, but measurably, significantly, in the direction that her doctors had said they would not move. They had no explanation within their framework. She had no explanation either, not in the language of that framework, but she recognized what had happened. She had stopped living only at the surface of her own biology. She had dropped into the depth. She had engaged with the quantum healing field not as a concept but as a reality she was willing to inhabit. And the field had responded, not because she had done something extraordinary, because she had stopped doing something ordinary. She had stopped treating the surface as the whole truth. She had lifted the veil, and you have been living at the surface of something with infinite depth. Today, you began to see beneath it. Here is what I want to ask you, and I want you to sit with this, not answer it quickly, not dismiss it, but genuinely sit with it as the question it is. What would change in how you live if you genuinely inhabited the recognition that your body is a quantum field, rather than a machine? Not as a belief, not as a hope, as a working understanding that you brought to every interaction with your own biology, every meal, every breath, every moment of rest or movement or stillness, every time you look in a mirror, every time you feel something in your body that the surface framework calls a symptom. What would change? Because this is the integration principle that this transmission has been building toward. The shift from surface to depth is not a one-time event. It is a practice. It is the ongoing choice to inhabit the deeper layer of what you know yourself to be. To bring the quantum understanding of your biology into your daily relationship with your body. To treat the biophotonic field as real. To treat the epigenetic responsiveness as real. To treat the zero-point field connection as real. To treat the consciousness-biology interface as real. Not because you are required to believe these things, because the evidence points toward them, and the ancient traditions mapped them, and your own body is already living them, whether or not your surface awareness is participating in the recognition. The quantum healing field is not activated by this transmission. It was activated long before you were born. It has been active every moment of your life. It is the deepest layer of what your biology is. What this transmission offers is not activation, but recognition. The recognition that what you thought was the whole truth about your body was the thinnest surface layer of something with infinite depth, and that the depth is accessible, that the veil between your surface understanding and the quantum reality of your own biology is not a barrier, it is a membrane. And it dissolves the moment your awareness is ready to see through it. Something in you was ready. That's why you're here. Now here is what I want you to do with this recognition. Not tomorrow, not when you've had time to think about it more. Now, take one thing from this transmission, one layer that landed differently than the others, one recognition that felt like something shifting rather than something being added, and make it the lens through which you interact with your body today. Just today, not forever, not as a commitment, as an experiment. If it was the recognition of the biophotonic field, spend today aware that your body is generating light. Let that awareness be present when you eat, when you move, when you rest. Notice what it changes in how you relate to the body you're inhabiting. If it was the recognition of epigenetic responsiveness, spend today treating the information environment of your cells as something you are actively participating in generating. Notice the quality of the information you're feeding your biology through your thoughts, your attention, your emotional state. Not to force anything, to be aware. If it was the recognition of the quantum field pattern, spend today holding the understanding that what you are at the deepest level is not a solid thing with fixed limits, but a coherent pattern in a field that has no edges. Notice what that changes in how large you feel, in how bounded, in how subject to the ordinary rules of entropy and limitation. If it was the recognition of consciousness as the ground rather than the product, spend today resting in the awareness that is aware of all of this, the awareness that is reading these words, the awareness that has been present through every layer of this transmission, the awareness that was there before you pressed play and will be there after the transmission ends, the awareness that the ancient traditions described as unborn and undying. Rest in that, not as a belief, as a recognition of something that is already and always the case. This is the practice, not a technique, a recognition, practiced daily, deepened over time, becoming, gradually, the ground from which you live, rather than the occasional destination you visit. And here is the community question I want to leave you with, because you are not alone in this excavation. There are others here, watching this transmission, following these layers down. Others who sensed there was more beneath the surface and came looking. Others who are in the same process of recognition that you are in right now. Tell me this in the comments below. Tell me which layer landed, which recognition felt like something lifting rather than something being added. Was it the quantum biology of the body as field? Was it the biophotonic light body? Was it the epigenetic responsiveness to consciousness? Was it the 0-point field connection? Was it the ancient wisdom traditions mapping what physics is now finding? Was it the recognition of consciousness as ground rather than product? Was it something that doesn't fit those categories? Something that arose in you during this transmission that you haven't found the words for yet? Tell me. Because this community is not a collection of people who watched the same video. It is a community of depth seekers who are in the same process of lifting the veil. And what you found in your excavation is valuable to everyone else who is digging. Type, I see beneath the surface now, if that's where you are, if the recognition landed. If something shifted, type it. Not as a declaration of certainty, as a statement of direction, as the acknowledgement that you have chosen to look beneath the surface of what you thought you knew about your own body, your own consciousness, your own potential. Because here is the integration principle that I want to leave you with. The principle that ties every layer of this transmission together into a single understanding that you can carry forward. You are not a surface creature who occasionally glimpses depth. You are a depth creature who has been living at the surface. The surface is real. The surface is where your life happens, where you eat and sleep and love and work and move through the world. The surface is not to be abandoned or transcended or escaped, but it is not the whole truth. It is the outermost layer of something with infinite depth. And the depth is not separate from the surface. It is beneath it, supporting it, generating it. The surface is the expression of the depth. And when you live in recognition of the depth, the surface changes, not because you force it to, because the information environment changes, because the quantum field responds, because the epigenome reads the shift, because the biophotonic field regains coherence, because the pattern aligns with the field. This is what healing is, at the quantum level, at the biological level, at the level that the ancient traditions and the modern science are both pointing toward. This is what immortality means when you strip away the surface interpretation and look at what's actually beneath it. Not the physical body living forever unchanged. The recognition that what you are at the deepest level was never subject to the limitations of the surface, never subject to the entropy of the machine, never subject to the running down of the clock. The pattern arises and dissolves. The awareness in which it arises does not. And you are, at the deepest layer, not the pattern. You are the awareness, the field, the ground in which the pattern appears. You are not becoming immortal. You are recognizing that what you are at the deepest level was never mortal in the way the surface suggested. The veil is thinner than you think, and now you can see through it. What has been revealed cannot be re-hidden. You have seen the layers now. You have followed the excavation from the surface, understanding of the body as machine, through the quantum biology of the body as field, through the biophotonic light body, through the zero-point field connection, through the epigenetic responsiveness to consciousness, through the ancient wisdom traditions that mapped this hidden territory, through the parable and the practice to the deepest layer, the recognition of consciousness as the ground, the awareness as the field, the self as something that was never only what the surface suggested. You cannot unsee this. You cannot return to the surface as if it were the whole truth. You have looked beneath it, and what you found beneath it is more real than what was visible from the surface, more fundamental, more enduring, more you. You are no longer a surface dweller. You see the depth now, and the depth has always been there, beneath every moment of your life, beneath every breath, beneath every heartbeat, beneath every cell of the body you've been calling yours. A quantum field of coherent light, connected to the infinite energy of the zero-point vacuum, organized by a consciousness that the ancient traditions called by 1,000 names, and that quantum mechanics is beginning to approach from the direction of mathematics and measurement. It was always there. You just hadn't looked deep enough yet. Welcome to what was always beneath everything. If this transmission reached you, if something in these layers resonated with something in you that was already there, waiting to be recognized, then stay. There are more layers to lift, more veils to dissolve, more of what you thought you knew to be gently dismantled and replaced with something deeper and truer and more extraordinary. Every transmission on this channel goes deeper than the last. Every layer we lift reveals the next one waiting beneath it. This is not a destination, it is a direction, and the direction is always the same, deeper. If you know someone who has been sensing that their body is more than they've been told, that something is pressing upward through the surface of everything they've been handed as truth, share this transmission with them. What happens when two people drop beneath the surface together is not just doubled awareness. It is a resonance between two fields that makes the depth more accessible to both. The veil thins not just for one, but for the field between them. Send it to someone who is ready. And if the quiet hours are when the surface noise drops lowest for you, when the depth becomes most audible, return to this in those moments. The layers open differently in stillness. You will find things on a second listening that the surface was too loud to let through the first time. Subscribe if you're ready to keep going, not because someone told you to, because something in you is ready to see the next layer. And the layer beneath that. And the layer beneath that. The veil is thin, and you are learning to see through it. The 0-point field we explored today is a territory that goes even deeper than what we had space to reach here. The transmission called the 0 point is not what you think goes directly into the hidden field beneath it, that actually generates reality, the layer beneath the layer we touched today. That is exactly where this excavation continues.